I'm Liz Hirsch-Naftali. Welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And today I have a very special guest. We have Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan from Minnesota. And I am really excited because first, I have not had an opportunity to have somebody from Minnesota on. I have not had a lieutenant governor, and Peggy is also Native American, and she is an amazing young leader. And I've had some amazing young women leaders, but she is also quite special in that way. So I just want to say welcome. I know we're not in person having coffee, but until we do have a coffee in person, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a first of a few things on your podcast. This is great, Liz.
Yeah, and also you are a first Native American leader to be a woman elected in an executive office in U.S. history. So that is quite special.
Thank you. It is overdue. I'm the first, but not the last. I'll tell you that.
Exactly. That isn't that true that we waited so long, but that you have been able to break that ceiling, and now there'll be others that can do it as well.
Thank you.
So welcome. The first thing that I would love to talk about is that you are a Native American. And could you tell us about the tribe you're from? And I know you have a special name, and just like to learn what it means, because I think sometimes in our country, we talk about it as a title or as a category, but we don't really get to know who people are and what that means.
For sure. I'm happy to talk about that. So I think one of the ways that can be helpful to talk about is to just even introduce myself to you in the traditional way. We have a protocol that we use. And so I will do that, and then I'll explain a little bit. So Buju, Peggy Flanagan, Indigenous Cause, Gijiwe Wadamukwe, Indigo, Wabagag and Cognan Junjaba, Mangan and Dodame. I just said, my name is Peggy Flanagan. My English name is Peggy Flanagan. My Ojibwe name or spirit name is Speaks with a Loud and Clear Voice Woman. I'm a member of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe, which is a tribe located in Minnesota. And my family is the Wolf Clan. Everyone has a clan, and your clan has a role. And our role is to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind, which is why I am so happy to be able to be in this role as well. So we have 11 Native nations who share their geography with the state of Minnesota. We have 7 Ojibwe and 4 Dakota communities. Those are the primary tribes in Minnesota. Part of my identity as a Native woman or as an Anishinaabe is to make sure that I am doing right by people and by community, taking care of this next generation, which is where I've focused a lot of my work. But I think the most important thing for folks to know is that we are contemporary people who still exist. I have colleagues who I worked with when I was in the legislature. I gave my retirement speech, and one of my former colleagues came up to me and he said, I didn't know that you were Native American. I thought they were all dead. It was interesting. And in Minnesota, we use Minnesota interesting, right? I said, surprise. I sort of didn't know what else to say in that moment. But I thought, here's someone who absolutely has Native people in their district. We are everywhere. And I think that's incredibly important to know, because if you don't believe that people exist, or you think that we are somehow a relic of the past,
right,
then you don't feel the need to address our policy issues or to invest in our communities. And I think that's probably the most important thing for your listeners to know, is just that we exist as contemporary people, and we have sovereign governments, and we are in the Constitution as with political identities. So we don't have exclusively a racial identity, but it really is a political identity. I'm a dual citizen of the United States of America and the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, or the White Earth Nation. So that's a little bit about
No, I love it. Thank you. And again, for me, it's also I don't know these things, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And then your job is a lieutenant governor. And can you talk a little bit about what the lieutenant governor does?
Sure. Growing up, I didn't dream of becoming lieutenant governor. That was not my path. But I think there are many things in my life that led me to this role. The most important thing, I think, for lieutenant governors is, of course, to be ready, and to be ready if, God forbid, anything happens to our governor. And, Governor Walz and I work very closely together. I think in each state, it varies what the role of a lieutenant governor is. But I always say, don't sleep on lieutenant governors, because many of us come from community, come from movement based work. And many of us have been engaged in a lot of policy work. And that's certainly what led me to this role. We've got, with Democratic lieutenant governors, we're the most diverse group of elected officials in the country. 80% of us are either women or people of color or Indigenous. And I think that speaks to the sort of changing face of politics, but also that we've got leaders from diverse communities across the country who are in these roles, and also, I think, providing an opportunity for people to see themselves reflected in these leaders, and maybe see something that they didn't see
Yeah.
before growing up.
Yeah, the purpose of this podcast is to talk about the heart and humanity of our leaders. And I've been very fortunate to have people who are quite diverse and from both the Republican side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle. And while we stay away from policy, sometimes what you learn through this is that like some things that appear to be policy are really just bipartisan because they affect everyone. And so while, I don't go into like the latest legislation or those kind of items, it is very interesting because we have so much more in common and we share than that divides us. And what you've just described is like people from all over the country who are lieutenant governors, and they're diverse, but you all come together to try to make things better for people in your states, which is huge.
Each of us have lived experience. And if we are doing these jobs in the right way, we are bringing our full selves into these roles and into these offices.
Yeah. And also what I love is that kids, and I know you have a daughter, but that children can look and see that a Native American young woman can be a leader. And that tells both boys and girls what the potential is. So I think that's also very special and important for young people to be able to like look up at, or for parents to like say, oh, wow, my kid could be this, because we don't live in a world where you can sometimes imagine things. You have to see it to believe that it's possible.
That's absolutely right. And I think about, my daughter, who now, this completely different than the reality in which I grew up, right? She has, Auntie Deb, who's the Secretary of the Department of Interior, right?
Mhm.
And Deb Holland, or, Auntie Sharice, who's in Congress, or
Yeah.
her Auntie Jamie, who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, right, in the House of Representatives here in Minnesota.
Mhm.
Anything is possible, right? And so I think that we are just in this moment where things are so different, and I can't wait to see what is possible for her and for other young people who are so much, what they see in their is possible in their future is so much bigger than anything I could even possibly have imagined, and
Yeah.
what that just means for their trajectory and for our
Yeah.
future as a whole.
Yeah. That's what it keeps us optimistic about the future, right? How old is your daughter?
She's 11.
Okay.
And
So,
she just graduated from 5th grade, and I finally stopped crying a little while ago, because I cannot believe that my baby is going to middle school.
yes, well, put that seatbelt on because it just keeps going faster and faster and faster. How do you balance between being a mom, being a wife, and being a leader? That's a lot.
It is, and I don't know that it's ever a balance. I think it's sort of a hot mess all the time. But you figure it out. I am really fortunate to have an incredible husband who is truly a partner in this work, and I also have a daughter who has grown up around this, and I am grateful that she can kind of go with the flow, and was just sort of reminiscing that I oftentimes would take her with me when I was on the House floor, and she would, walk up and down the aisles of the House, and talk to other representatives, and they would all bribe her with candy, of course. But, it is just the reality that we need to bring our children with us sometimes. And I think folks are like, oh, that's so great that you bring your daughter. What an incredible example. And I was like, yes. And, this is
Yeah.
just reality for so many, for so many women and so many people in leadership. And I also have to say, I have an incredible team around me who make sure that I can show up ready at many things. It takes a village
Yeah.
to raise a lieutenant governor. I'll tell you that.
to raise a lieutenant governor. I like that one. Yeah. And her daughter too,
Yes.
And talk about growing up, because you are from Minnesota, you grew up there, a little bit about your parents and your family. What was it like? And because we talk about like what the future is, but it's interesting to hear where you come from.
Sure. I grew up in the community of St. Louis Park and still live there with my family. I love it. And it's a first ring suburb of Minneapolis. But we grew up in an apartment building there. My mom had a Section 8 housing voucher that she used to secure housing for us when I was just a baby. And she picked that community because she knew that we'd have access to good schools and a strong neighborhood. And I think a lot about that because, we grew up in this apartment building and across the hall lived Macho Indiana, who were refugees from Cuba, who basically like I just would go back and forth across the hall and, grew up with them, or Kathy, who was our upstairs neighbor who would drive me to school. And my mom's shift would start early at the hospital. She was a phlebotomist. And my friend Wendy, who's from Puerto Rico, who lived in the apartment below us. And I think about that because there was just sort of community everywhere that I went. And my mom worked incredibly hard for us. And there were times and moments, right, where we needed a little extra help with that, the Section 8 housing voucher, and relied on CCAP, the Child Care Assistance Program. And I was that kid with a different colored lunch ticket back in the day when we relied on free and reduced price lunch. So, for me, it's important to remember where I come from and that there are other families like mine.
Yeah.
And, for my dad really wasn't a part of my life until later on when he was sober and healthy and could be.
Yeah.
And I'm really fortunate that we had an incredibly strong relationship. My dad was a good troublemaker, oftentimes would be a rabble rouser around things and issues that were important in the tribe, but never shrunk or made himself small. And I think that that's one of the most important things that he taught me, to remember who I am and where I come from. But I'm the perfect combination of my parents, right? Like my mom was like, you work within the system, you vote, you have a responsibility to community.
Right.
And those things in civic engagement. And my dad was like, you burn the system down. And I think, I'm a little fist in the air and a little also we're going to pass policies and laws, right, that make a difference for folks,
Right.
and that you can do both.
You can do both. And there's a time, it's all nuance, right? You know
That's
when
right.
to do the different ones. And you pass that on to your daughter so that she also understands that.
That's right.
So you also went to the University of Minnesota, and obviously all of your class. And I appreciate your story about like the different color voucher, because I think that some people just don't realize, like, as a child, what that means. Like, you kind of know you're different and you have to hand it and someone has to see it. And there has to be something for every child that has to do a different process than the rest of the kids, or than the majority to, and that's heartbreaking for me to hear it now. But I think that when I hear your voice and your strength, that some of it comes from having to go through that experience.
Yeah, I think there is some resiliency in how I grew up. There certainly were the challenges of growing up in poverty, and I had this amazing family and community around me. And I think that is why I was able to come out on the other side. And now, every day I get to pay that back and pay that forward. That feels like a sort of powerful full circle moment.
Yeah. And did you have a teacher or a specific teacher in school that really was like a mentor or inspired you?
For sure. So my favorite teacher ever, and remains my favorite teacher, is Peter Redmond, who was my speech coach in high school. Originally, he recruited me to take a speech class, and I was like, I don't know. And I was a freshman and real awkward. And, he recruited me into his class. And he was the only teacher of color that I had. Which is phenomenal now, thinking about my daughter's experience in school. But he was really the safe place for so many of us. And when I ran for school board, and then again for House, and then as Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Redmond would help me practice my speeches. And he still checks in. Remains my biggest fan. And those kinds of teachers I think are just everybody has at least one, and if you're lucky, you have more than one. He changed the entire trajectory of my life and how I thought about myself and how I carried myself.
Yeah.
And I am indebted to him. And he just celebrated his 70th birthday, and many of his former students were there because he gave us all such an incredible gift.
It's a great story, and I think that people should have at least one, but not everybody does. But that teacher or those teachers that you can just think about, and in your case, who's still there all these years later and is still like your cheerleader, but also supporting what you do, which is amazing. I have an interesting question. I always ask people, what's the best advice you've received? What's the worst advice? And you're laughing, but I'm going to throw one in there for you, which is, what is like the advice you would give to young people because of your experience? But you can answer all of those or one of those. But I haven't really asked people what advice they would give, but listening to you, I feel like I need advice from you.
I would say the best advice that I've ever received is from a woman named LaDonna Harris, who is a Comanche woman who was the head of American Indians an Opportunity. And she said, Peggy, at no time do I stop being a Comanche woman. No matter what room I walk into, I am still myself.
Great.
And that for me was really important, gave me permission that at no time can I stop or take, put one hat on or take another, another one off. I am an Ojibwe woman all the time. And I have to be able to show up that way. The worst advice I've ever received is when I was a very young candidate and a seasoned elected official said, you know what, Peggy, you got to stop talking about kids in poverty. It makes folks uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I said, well, if that makes them uncomfortable, then maybe I'm not the person for them to vote for. But I think there's a lot of folks with this experience that we have to talk about. So that was interesting advice. And then I'll say the advice that I try to give to young people, especially young women, is, similar to the advice that my dad, I think, really modeled for me, which is do not make yourself small. Take up as much space as you can. And I think we are in a moment where especially young women need to feel confident in themselves and realize that they are experts in their own life and that they bring so much value into every space that they enter into. So I literally will watch it, right? If I'm in a classroom or I'm with young people and I say, don't make yourself feel, don't make yourself small. There are plenty of people who will do that, right?
Yeah, they'll do it for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And then just physically watch students sit up straight. Right. And, any meeting I go into, Liz, I spread out. I've got like my, day book or my binder with my schedule, usually my, LaCroix and my coffee, 2 phones, and just take up space. I just think it's, for me, sometimes even just a physical reminder that you deserve to be here. The people you represent, their voices matter and they have to be in this room. And that there are so many people who loved me into existence that I come from who also need to be represented well at that table. And I need to do that in a good way.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I'm a little older than you are. And I also still go to meetings and I do this thing where I say, puff up, like do not go in there and be shrunken. And it's just a reminder because yes, we know how to handle ourselves, but sometimes you go into a room and the feeling of the room is like trying to bring you down. It doesn't matter what age, but you just have to kind of go, I got my LaCroix, I got my coffee, I got my I'm here. And I do agree with you that we have to walk into a room and say, we're here and feel like that is the room that we're supposed to be in.
Exactly.
And needs us in it. So I appreciate your saying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you rapid questions that kind of get to know you questions and answer as you wish. What is your favorite sound?
That's a great question. My favorite sound is Siobhan giggling. That's my favorite one. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure it's delightful. And then there's days you're like, okay, quiet.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is your favorite color?
Turquoise.
Pretty. And your favorite smell?
It's probably my my mom's perfume. From growing up. Sometimes I'll catch a whiff of it, and it's just I've since lost my mom and my dad, but there's little reminders all the time that they're around, and so when I get a whiff of it, I'm like, oh, hi, Mom.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
lovely. Yeah. My mom had a scent that I still, if I smell it, and I don't that often, it also warms my heart.
absolutely.
Who is your biggest cheerleader?
My husband,
Very nice.
the second gentleman, he is just my best friend and the love of my life. And I'm really, really lucky. And he is always in my corner. And I am so grateful. And I still have a big crush on him. So
Good. Well, he
that's
sounds like
good.
he's lucky too. I love that.
Thank you.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Ooh, Pavarotti, which is from a local ice cream shop here in Minnesota called Sebastian Joe's. It is banana ice cream with chunks of chocolate and caramel swirled throughout. But like, I've yet to have like really bad ice cream, right? Like ice cream generally is pretty good. I'm a fan.
Okay, well, that one sounds really good. And what is your favorite food? If there was one meal that you had to only have, what would it be?
It's a little cliche, but it is Monoman. It is hand harvested wild rice. You know, it is my favorite food. It is the perfect food. It is something that I am very good at making, and it's super versatile. You can use it with everything. And if I had one thing to live off my whole life, that would be it.
It's a good one. You talk about cooking. What is your favorite household chore?
Oh, my favorite household chore, I think, is actually this sounds a little ridiculous, but it's cleaning the bathroom. 'Cause it feels like it is like a space that, like, I am accomplished when I'm done. I can see my, good
Effort.
work. We just got bought a new house in October, so I still take joy, in cleaning it. That may change,
Yeah,
but,
yeah. But for
still
right now, it's still
yeah,
fun to clean it. Yeah.
absolutely.
And then do you have time to exercise still?
Yes, and if I don't, that's a problem. So, for me, there is a beautiful loop around our neighborhood, and so I usually walk a mile in the morning, and then one more time at night.
Oh, that's a great way. That's a
Yeah,
great
it's
way.
a good
It's
way to
really
open and to close the day, and just have some time to myself.
yeah. And do you listen to music when you do that?
I do.
What's your music?
I am a big New Kids on the Block fan. And that is, I'm not ashamed. I'm a blockhead as a lieutenant governor, and also early '90s R&B is sort of my go-to.
Great, great. Okay, this question, we may have kind of covered it earlier, but what is your superpower?
Ooh, well, I think my superpower, honestly, is in my spirit name and my Indian name that I was given. Speaks of the loud and clear voice woman. I think there's a lot of when I actually was named in a ceremony a year ago, and so that name has a lot of responsibility, right? That goes along with it. But I think that that is my superpower, being able to tell the truth when needed and to communicate effectively with folks, and hopefully to inspire them to take action to do something.
Yeah, and that's really lovely. And it is a name that gives it's a powerful name, but it's also a name that you have to live up to.
That's right.
So I think that's also an interesting piece, which is it's I think it would be interesting for people to have power names like that that give them some sort of an understanding. And also being from the Wolf clan and understanding what that means about not leaving anyone behind is pretty special also.
It is just a big part of my identity. And I do think that there, even those moments, right, when I'm feeling small, I'm like, sit up. Your speaks with the cloud, speaks with the loud and clear voice woman.
Yeah.
This is your responsibility. Yep.
Yeah.
Like buck up.
Exactly. Show up, bump up, and bring others along with you. And that kind of gets to my last question, which I've asked all leaders, and I like it because all the answers are a little bit different, but it all comes together. And my question is like, what is joy mean to you? What brings you joy? It could be personal or through your work. And how, if you have joy, do you share that with others?
So, what brings me joy is being in community, surrounded by people. I am an extrovert. I just love the energy of others, especially when we're together and celebrating or organizing around something. What also brings me joy is just how powerful it is to also see live music. That I think is an incredible gift and a way to bring people together. The last thing is just like being with my family, taking time down to just play and be silly. I feel like so much of what we do every day is just hard, and just remembering to play. And I think one of my favorite things about, being with my daughter, with Siobhan, she's super creative and artistic and, silly all the time. and gives me, like, reminds me what it was like to be a kid and to just pause and take care of myself, celebrate in that moment. And nobody makes me laugh harder than she does. So I experience my most joyful moments just being with my kid.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I don't have anything else to say. I mean, it's one of those things that you just think to yourself, yeah. I sometimes with my kids, we have like these dance parties in the morning or, all of a sudden you like dance for like 2 minutes and it's exhausting. And you're not exhausting, but you're just moving so crazy. And then afterwards, you're just so happy because you've done it. I've done it with my kids. It's not the same as waking up and going, okay, I'm going to do a 10-minute, a 10-minute workout. So I totally appreciate that. And look, the one thing that I've learned, and I've never met you in person. I look forward to it, but I've heard you speak and I know who you are. And I just want to say thank you for showing up and thank you for, I'm sure the LaCroix water's to your left and there's a coffee to your right, but that you're here and that your message is really, your name is loud and clear and that you'll keep using that voice to make other people's lives better, but really just for sharing yourself, because the authenticity in which you spoke today, I think will resonate with a lot of people.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate it so much. And thank you for showing just the human side of leaders, which so often gets missed. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Chimigwech, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.